Terraform on AWS. This is our officially first lecture, to be honest. Terraform on AWS. How we are going to use Terraform on AWS? Terraform fundamental like command, language, settings, provider, resources, variable, data sources, meta arguments. All these things we need to learn. This is more about the agenda setting or what we will be creating on AWS. So Terraform AWS real world approach, step by step, is what we will be doing. Incremental way to build complex infrastructure. And these are all the parts, topics I will be covering in the training. AWS VPC, 3-tier architecture, AWS EC2 instance and security groups, AWS classic load balancer, application load balancer, context path based routing, application load balancer, host header based routing, application load balancer, HTTP header and query string redirects, AWS DNS to DB implementation, AWS auto scaling with launch configuration, AWS network load balancer with the TCP and TLS, AWS CloudWatch alarms for ALB, ASG and CIS, Terraform local modules leverage public registry, Terraform modules built from scratch, Terraform remote state storage, that is the remote location storage, and not to forget Terraform remote state databases. So we'll be working with a lot of resources on AWS using Terraform. Terraform top level blocks, restating. You have Terraform block, provider block and resource block. These are fundamental blocks. Then inside variable, you have these variable block like input variable block, output value block and local value block. Calling or referencing the blocks like data sources and modules. Most of Terraform features are implemented at top level blocks. Terraform languages uses limited number of top level block types like which are blocks that can appear outside of any other block in a Terraform configuration file. AWS VPC 3-tier architecture built manually using AWS Management Console is what is expected that you know it. But our objective is build the same using Terraform modules, local variables, Terraform variable that will be stored in terraform.tf-vars, then VPC auto.tf-vars and Terraform version constants, Terraform code organizing or production grade style. So this is our this is our AWS cloud. This AWS cloud consists of VPC, that is virtual private cloud, which is for networking. In AWS, we call them as availability zone, availability zone 1, availability zone 2. Inside that, we create this public subnet with NAT gateway or private subnet for EC2 instances or private subnet for databases. All these things we will be creating using Terraform. Availability zone 2, public subnet, NAT gateway, private subnet for EC2 instances, private subnet for databases. To allow the access to the users, user can directly access them through the public subnet, because public subnet means the public IP address. Whereas if the instances or the resources are in private subnet, then you need a different approach. You need a NAT gateway for that, like NAT gateway. So from the private subnet, you go to the NAT gateway, and from NAT gateway, you can send the outbound communication to the internet with elastic IP address of both. This is how you can have the outbound communication. We are going to set up all these things with the Terraform. So Terraform EC2 instance, security groups, Terraform AWS concept will work with the Terraform module VPC, will work with the security group, will work with the EC2 instance, meta management, meta argument, Terraform null resource, file provisioner, remote executor, and local execute provisioner. Like here we are talking about the security group, which allows port number 2222, port number 22, destination is all, means quad 0 means internet, means all. This is another private subnet where we have security group, port number 20 and 80, destination is one specific subnet, that is 10.0.0.0/16 CIDR block. And this is the sequence what we are going to learn. In part 7 you have these topics that will be covered: EC2 instance and security groups. In particular, you will see that C4 VPC variable.tf, VPC module.tf, VPC output.tf, which is creating Oracle AWS VPC using Terraform modules. This one security group, variables, output, and Bastion host security group, and this private security group. This is creating AWS security group using Terraform modules. Similarly, this part, database, data source, creating AWS AMI data sources to get latest AMI ID dynamically. This part, instances, creating AWS EC2 instance using Terraform modules. This is null resources and variable, which is for file provisioner, remote execute provisioner, and local executor provisioner. This is what all there in our agenda, which we will learn during this training. So VPC EC2 instance plus security group plus load balancer, elastic load balancer. So we'll create ELB also, that is classic load balancer, and this one classic load balancer. Terraform module security group, and add custom security rule for inbound connection on port number 81. Then AWS application load balancer, which we will be creating using Terraform module AWS application load balancer, which will allow the users to connect to through the application load balancer to the private subnet. The instance is running in the private subnet. This is what we will learn. Application load balancer, context path based routing. Also we'll be creating like one instance. In the subnet we have an instance where one application is available at /app, another is /star, and this is /app2. This is path based, like this is your URL and this is app1, or this is a complete common URL, this is app2. All this path based routing we will be configuring through the load balancer, like if the request is coming from app1 or app2 or from general website, where the request will go, to which instance the request will go, where the request is to be diverted. That also we will learn in this training, configuring application load balancer with path based routing. This is application load balancer host header based routing. So what is the header host? Based on that, it will be sending the request to appropriate endpoint, like app1, this is my app, this is app2. So app1 is taking the request to another one at one domain or one instance, another domain, fixed response, this is app2 sending the request to this one. So this is a host header based routing that will be we will be doing it through the Terraform on AWS. Then this is custom header based routing and redirect with query string and host header. That also will be working with in AWS. These are all scenarios you have to spend a lot of time in understanding them, and to visualize that what we will be creating, what we will do on AWS using Terraform. This is the AWS DNS to DB using Terraform. This is also part of our agenda. We will be covering this Internet Gateway, Amazon Route 53, which is a DNS based routing. where the request will be managed. Everything will be managed through Terraform. That's all for the session. That shows you what all will be discussed and demonstrated during this training. Thank you very much for watching.